Shadows on the Horizon by Ruben White. The New Mexico territory stretched endlessly beneath a merciless sun, its red earth cracked and thirsting. Jake, Dusty and McCallister sat astride his horse, one hand resting on his pistol, the other holding the lead rope to a second mount. Behind him, Rufus Rook Blackwood rode in silence, his hands bound but his presence no less commanding. They'd been riding for 3 days, the journey to Silver Creek marked by little more than the rhythmic sound of hooves against hardpack and the occasional cry of a circling hawk. Dusty kept his eyes forward, though every fiber of his being yearned to turn and face the man who'd haunted his dreams for the past 5 years. "Your shoulder's bleeding again," Rook's voice cut through the silence, smooth as aged whiskey. "Might want to change that bandage before nightfall." Dusty's jaw tightened. The wound was a reminder of their first encounter, the night his brother Tom died. He could still hear the gunshots echoing through the canyon, still see Tom's body crumpling to the ground as Rook's gang fled into the darkness. "Save your breath, Blackwood. We've got another day's ride ahead." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. Dusty knew they'd need to make camp soon. Traveling at night in these parts was asking for trouble. As if reading his thoughts, Rook spoke again. "There's a box canyon about half a mile east. Good shelter, water source. Used to camp there with my boys." Dusty considered ignoring the suggestion, but his years as a lawman had taught him to set pride aside when survival was at stake. He steered them toward the canyon, keeping his gun hand ready. The shadows grew longer, stretching across the desert floor like grasping fingers. The canyon proved to be exactly as Rook had described. A small spring bubbled up from between the rocks, and the high walls offered protection from the wind. As Dusty secured the horses, Rook sat with his back against the canyon wall, watching with those calculating eyes of his. "You ever wonder why I didn't kill you that night?" Rook asked suddenly. Dusty froze, his hand instinctively moving to the scar on his chest. "I reckon you just missed." Rook's laugh was bitter. "I never miss, Lawman. Your brother was different, he drew first, made his choice. But you were just a kid wearing a badge too big for your shoulders." "And now?" Dusty turned, finally meeting Rook's gaze. "Now you're a man carrying a weight too heavy for any soul to bear." The truth of those words stung more than Dusty cared to admit. He busied himself with starting a fire, trying to ignore the way his hand shook. The flames cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls, reminiscent of the ghosts that haunted his dreams. As night settled in, Dusty cleaned and redressed his wound. The bullet had gone clean through, but the desert had a way of turning even minor injuries deadly. He could feel Rook watching him, those dark eyes missing nothing. "Your technique's all wrong," Rook commented. "Let me help before you get yourself killed." "Like you helped Tom?" The words hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. Rook's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or maybe just a trick of the firelight. "Tom was running protection for the Morgan family," Rook said quietly. "Did you know that?" "Same Morgans who've been squeezing every last penny from the honest folks in these parts. The ones who burned out 3 homesteader families last spring." Dusty's head snapped up. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check his saddlebags when you get back to Silver Creek. There's a letter from James Morgan himself, promising Tom a share of their profits." The world seemed to tilt beneath Dusty's feet. He remembered Tom's sudden prosperity in the months before his death, the new clothes, the fine horse. He'd assumed his brother had struck it lucky at the silver mines. "Why are you telling me this now?" Rook shifted, his chains rattling softly. "Because you deserve to know the truth before you hang me. Your brother wasn't the saint you remember, and I'm not the devil you've made me out to be." Before Dusty could respond, a sound caught his attention, the subtle shift of loose stone somewhere above them. His hand moved to his gun, but Rook's voice stopped him. "Too late, Lawman. They're already here." As if on cue, figures materialized from the darkness, at least 6 men, all armed. Dusty recognized some of them from wanted posters, members of Rook's gang, come to free their leader. "Step away from him, Marshal," one of them called out. We ain't looking to spill more blood than necessary. Dusty's mind raced. He was outnumbered, injured, and caught in a bad position. Even if he managed to take down a few of them, the odds of surviving were slim. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't," Rook said softly. "They'll kill you." "Since when do you care?" "Since I realized you might be the only honest lawman left in these territories." The gang members were moving closer, their boots scraping against stone. Dusty could feel sweat trickling down his back despite the cool night air. "Last chance, Marshal," the same voice called. Dusty looked at Rook, searching for any sign of deception. The outlaw's face remained impassive, but there was something in his eyes, a challenge, perhaps, or a question. In that moment, Dusty saw their reflection in the canyon wall, a lawman and an outlaw, both caught in a web of lies and half-truths, both seeking something that might be just out of reach. Justice, redemption, or maybe just understanding. He made his decision. Moving quickly, Dusty unlocked Rook's chains. The gang members tensed, fingers on triggers, but Rook held up a hand to stop them. "What's your play here, Lawman?" Rook asked, rubbing his wrists. "You're going to tell me everything about the Morgans," Dusty said. "And then we're going to make things right." A slow smile spread across Rook's face. "Might get us both killed." "Probably will." "Then I suppose we better not miss." The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows on the canyon walls. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to an unlikely alliance forged in the heart of the desert. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in 5 years, Dusty felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. As dawn approached, they rode out together, not as captive and captor, but as two men united against a common enemy. The horizon stretched before them, painted in shades of promise and possibility, while behind them, the shadows of the past began to fade in the growing light. The truth about Tom would have to wait. For now, there was justice to be served, and not just for the dead. The living had their own accounts to settle, their own wounds to heal. And sometimes, Dusty realized, the line between right and wrong, between law and justice, was as shifting as the desert sands themselves. They rode toward Silver Creek, toward the Morgans, toward whatever fate awaited them. The sun rose at their backs, casting their shadows long across the desert floor, a lawman and an outlaw, riding side by side into legend. Behind them, the canyon stood silent, keeping its secrets. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying stories of redemption and revenge, of brothers lost and unlikely allies found, of shadows that sometimes held more truth than the harsh light of day. And somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote called out to the fading stars, its cry echoing across the vast expanse of the New Mexico territory, a reminder that in these lands, nothing was ever quite what it seemed, and every ending was just another beginning in disguise. The end. Join the adventure with the Western Echoes, Cowboy Tales Unleashed. If you're loving our cowboy stories and captivating tales, don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button to stay updated on all our future posts. Saddle up and ride along with us.